In 1932, a single-shot shotgun cost a Kansas farmer $4.75 from the Sears catalog, less than a day's wages, and it hung on two bent nails by the kitchen door for the next 50 years. It killed the fox in the henhouse, the rat in the corn crib, and put meat on the table when the bank had taken nearly everything else. Number 9 on this list was so dependable that soldiers and farmers came to trust the very same design. And number 1 was called the perfect repeater, for a reason no modern gun has quite earned since. These were not trophies, they were tools, as ordinary as a hay rake and twice as trusted. Before we count them down, hit that subscribe button. Let's start with number 25. Number 25, the Crescent Hardware Store Double. Out of a brick factory in Norwich, Connecticut, came hundreds of thousands of side-by-side shotguns that never wore the maker's real name. Crescent Firearms built them by the wagon load, then stamped them with whatever brand the buyer wanted. Knickerbocker, New England, Victor, a different name for every hardware store on every main street in America. A farmer could walk in, lay down $9 or $10, and walk out with a 12-gauge double that smelled of oil and cheap walnut. They guarded chicken yards and rattled hawks out of the cottonwoods for 40 years. But many wore old Damascus barrels. Twisted iron never meant for modern smokeless shells, and as factories consolidated and powder grew hotter, the warning spread. The trade name doubles slipped out of the catalogs, and the names nobody could trace slipped out of memory with them. Number 24, the Davenport Single Barrel. Before the famous brands ruled the farm, W.H. Davenport was turning out plain break-action singles in that same Connecticut gun valley in the 1880s and the 1890s. They were homely things, a hammer, a barrel, a stock, and almost nothing else. But a boy could thumb the hammer back, swing on a crow lifting off the corn shocks, and bring supper down from 100 feet. They sold for a few dollars and asked for nothing but a wipe of oil and a dry place to hang. Farmers passed them to the youngest in the house, the learning gun, the one that taught a child to respect a muzzle. Davenport faded as bigger firms swallowed the cheap gun market whole, and today the name survives mostly on rusted barrels found in barn rafters, the makers long forgotten by the families who once leaned on them. Number 23, the Hopkins and Allen Hammer Double. Another son of Norwich, Hopkins and Allen built exposed hammer side-by-sides for the working farm, guns with two big visible hammers you cocked with your thumb before you ever raised them to your shoulder. There was honesty in those hammers. A man could see at a glance whether the thing was ready to fire. For $12 or $15 in the early 1900s, a farmer got two barrels, two triggers, and the reassurance that if the first shot missed the marauding coon, the second was a heartbeat away. They rode in wagon beds to the back 40 and stood guard against foxes through long lambing nights. When hammerless guns made the old exposed hammer design look clumsy and dated, Hopkins and Allen could not keep pace. The company was absorbed and shuttered, and its sturdy doubles became the quiet relics of a vanished gun town. Number 22, the Iver Johnson Champion. If one single shot deserves a monument on the American farm, it might be this one. Iver Johnson built the Champion top break single for decade after decade, and it was the gun a man bought when he had $5 and a real problem. A hawk circling the hens, a possum in the smokehouse, a snake in the spring box. You pressed the lever, the barrel dropped open, you slid in one shell and snapped it shut. One shot, made to count. Oral histories from the Midwest recall fathers handing the Champion across the kitchen table the way they handed over a pocket knife, a rite of passage tied up in trust. It never jammed. because there was almost nothing to jam. It faded only when cheap pumps and the great mail-order houses crowded the humble single off the rack. But for 2 generations, it was simply the gun behind the door. Number 21. The Stevens Model 94, J. Stevens. Arms of Massachusetts may have armed more American farm boys than any other maker, and the Model 94 single shot was the reason. They built it by the millions, a clean break action with a color-cased frame that turned a soft rainbow blue and gray in the light. It cost only a few dollars new, sometimes thrown in beside a box of shells, and it became the definitive first gun, the one that taught half the rural counties in America how to lead a flushing rabbit. The Model 94 lived in screen porches and pickup gun racks, dusty but always loaded, ready for whatever crossed the yard. It asked for nothing, and it gave back 40 years of service. The Model 94 faded as repeaters grew cheaper and the single shot lost its glamour. But plenty still hang on nails today, oiled by grandsons who cannot bear to sell them. Number 20. The Harrington and Richardson Topper. When the old singles wore out, the H&R Topper stepped right into their place, and it became the truck gun of rural America. It was plain as a fence post, a single break-action barrel and a snap of a latch, and it sold for next to nothing right through the middle of the century. Farmers bought them 2 at a time, one for the barn, one for the bed of the Ford. Children scattered starlings off the cherry trees with it. Men kept the woodpile clear of copperheads with it. It rusted, it dented, it got left out in the rain, and it kept right on firing because a topper did not have the dignity to quit. As autoloaders and slick pumps filled the gun cabinets of a richer post-war America, the dollar store single fell out of fashion. But for sheer hours of honest farm work, few guns ever logged more. Number 19. The Winchester Model 37. Even Winchester, the great name of the lever gun and the fine repeater, made a humble single shot, and the Model 37 became a quiet legend. Introduced in 1936 and marked by the bold red letters of its name pressed into the receiver, it carried real Winchester steel at a poor man's price. More than 1 million found their way to porches and pickups, and farmers loved that it wore the proud name without the proud cost. It snapped open over a hinge, took 1 shell, and locked tight as a bank vault, a single shot a man could hand down without apology. The red letter Winchester became the gift gun, the Christmas morning gun, the one that smelled of gun oil under the tree. Winchester retired it after the war as tastes turned toward repeaters, and the modest Model 37 became one of the company's most quietly mourned designs. Number 18. The Marlin Model 55 Goose Gun. Now here is an oddity the modern hunter has nearly forgotten: a bolt-action shotgun. Marlin built the Model 55 with a long, lean barrel and a bolt you worked like a deer rifle, and the farmer who needed reach loved it for exactly that. When the geese came over the stubble field too high for an ordinary gun, the goose gun stretched out and touched them. It was cheap, it held a few shells in a clip or magazine, and it asked for the patience of a man who only needed 1 good shot anyway. Farm folk used it on foxes slinking the tree line and on coyotes testing the lamb pen at dusk. The bolt-action shotgun always felt slightly strange, slow and deliberate where a pump was fast, and as autoloaders took over the waterfowl marsh, the goose gun drifted into obscurity, remembered now mostly by old hands. Number 17. The Mossberg Model 185. Mossberg made its name selling honest guns to people who counted every dollar, and its little bolt-action shotguns, the 183, the 185, and their kin were fixtures of the hardware store rack. The clever touch was the adjustable choke screwed onto the muzzle, Mossberg's Select choke, which let a farmer twist the barrel from a tight pattern for distant crows to an open spread for close rabbits. One gun, every job. They sold for well under $20 and lived hard lives in mudrooms and corn cribs. A boy could learn the whole grammar of shotgunning on one: lead, swing, follow through, without ever spending real money. As pump guns dropped in price and gained prestige, the plain bolt shotgun lost its corner of the market, and the Mossberg 185 quietly disappeared from the catalogs that once stacked them by the dozen. Number 16, the J.C. Higgins Model 20. You did not have to go to a gun shop to arm the farm. You went to Sears, Roebuck and Company. Under the J.C. Higgins house name, Sears sold the Model 20, a slick pump-action 12-gauge built by High Standard, for a price that undercut the famous brands by a comfortable margin. It came in a plain box to the depot, and a farmer drove the wagon to town to collect a real repeating shotgun he had bought from a catalog by mail. 5 shells, fast follow-up shots, and a smooth slide action that rattled crows out of the Milo in a hurry. It was the everyman's pump, the gun that proved you no longer needed a gun store name to own a good one. When Sears left the firearms business, the Higgins name vanished overnight, and a workhorse pump that armed a generation became an orphan with no parent to claim it. Number 15, the Western Field. Where Sears had J.C. Higgins, Montgomery Ward had Western Field, and the rivalry put a shotgun within reach of every rural mailbox in the country. Western Field guns were built by the big makers, Mossberg, Savage, and others, then dressed in Ward's own house name and sold through the thick wish book catalog that every farm family kept by the stove. A man could order a pump or a single or a bolt gun in the dead of winter and have it waiting at the depot by spring planting. They were good guns, hiding behind a store brand name, and they did the same eternal chores: the hawk, the rat, the rabbit for the pot. As the great mail-order catalogs died and the house brands died with them, Western Field became a name that puzzles the grandchildren who find one in the closet, unaware it was once as common as a seed catalog. Number 14, the Winchester Model, 1887, lever-action shotgun. Here is a gun the modern world forgot almost completely, a shotgun you worked with a lever like a cowboy's rifle. John Browning himself designed it for Winchester, and for a brief stretch it armed ranchers and farmers who liked the familiar throw of a lever under their hand. You swung the lever down and up, and a fresh shell rose into the chamber with a heavy, satisfying clunk. The later 1901 model handled the big 10-gauge loads for men who wanted reach and authority. It rode saddle scabbards on the open range and stood in ranch house corners against varmints and worse. But the lever was slow and stiff next to the new pump guns, and Browning's own pump-action designs soon buried it. The lever shotgun became a curiosity, a forgotten branch of the family tree, remembered now mostly by collectors who marvel that it ever existed. Number 13, the Stevens Model 520 and 620. When Stevens wanted a pump gun to rival the best, it again turned to John Browning, and the result was the humpbacked Model 520 and its refined cousin, the 620. They wore that distinctive squared-off receiver, took down into 2 pieces for a wagon box or a saddlebag, and ran smooth as a creek over stones. Farmers prized the takedown feature, the way the whole gun broke in half for cleaning or for hiding behind the seat of the truck. They cycled fast, fed reliably, and shrugged off dust, mud, and neglect. The 520 even served in 2 world wars, which only deepened the trust farm families placed in it back home. But the squared receiver looked old-fashioned beside the sleek pumps of the 1950s, and the Browning-designed Stevens slipped out of production and before long out of the national memory entirely. Number 12. The Remington Model 11. America's first truly successful auto-loading shotgun rode into the country under the Remington name. The Model 11 was a licensed version of Browning's long recoil design, and the whole barrel slid back and forward with each shot in a motion that seemed like magic to a man raised on single shots. You loaded the magazine, and the gun did the rest. 5 fast shells with nothing to do but pull the trigger. Farmers who could afford the step-up were astonished. No thumbing a hammer, no working a slide, just shoot and shoot again. It cleared a flock of crows off the seed corn before they knew what hit them. The humpback silhouette became a familiar sight in the duck blind and the barnyard alike. Remington built it for decades, then replaced it with newer self-loaders after the war, and the trailblazing Model 11 faded into the background of the autoloaders it had fathered. Number 11. The Browning Auto 5. This was the gun the Remington Model 11 was copied from, John Browning's masterpiece, the very first dependable autoloader, born in 1905 and humpbacked like no other gun before or since. Browning was so proud of it he set up to sell it under his own name, and the Auto 5 became the autoloader that everything else measured itself against for half a century. On the farm, it was the gun of the man who had done well, the one with a paid-off mortgage and a little pride, and it swung on doves over the sunflowers as easily as it shouldered against a fox in the lane. That long recoil action ran for decades without complaint, and families handed it down like a pocket watch. Browning built the humpback for an astonishing run, but when softer shooting designs took over, even the great Auto 5 finally bowed out, its strange humped back now a thing of nostalgia. Number 10. The Remington Model 31. Before the famous pump that conquered America, Remington built the Model 31, and the men who carried one swore it was the smoother gun. Its slide ran so slick that the company called it the ball-bearing repeater, and old hands still describe racking it as buttery, an action that almost worked itself. It threw its empties out the side and fed the next shell without a hitch, and farmers who bought one in the 1930s or the 40s rarely bought another shotgun in their lives. It cleared barns of pigeons and put rabbits in the stew pot through the lean years and the fat ones alike. But the Model 31 cost more to build than Remington liked, and in 1950 the company replaced it with a cheaper, simpler pump that would become a household name. The smoother, costlier Model 31 was discontinued, and one of the finest pumps ever made slid quietly into obscurity. Number 9. The Ithaca Model 37 Featherlight. Out of Ithaca, New York, came a pump gun with a trick no other could match. It loaded and ejected through a single port on the bottom, so no shell ever flew past a right or left-handed shooter's face. It was light, hence the Featherlight name, and a farmer working all day appreciated every ounce shaved off the gun on his shoulder. The bottom eject design kept rain and chaff out of the action, which mattered when your gun spent its life in a dusty crib or a wet duck slough. Farm families loved the Model 37 for its balance and its sweet pointing, and it earned a fierce loyalty that lasted generations. It survived longer than most on this list, but the flood of cheaper imported pumps eventually pushed the classic American Featherlight toward the margins, where it remains a beloved name spoken with real affection by the few who still carry one. Number 8. The Fox Model B. When Savage Arms put the proud old Fox name on an affordable box-lock double, the working farmer finally got a side-by-side he could actually pay for. The Fox Model B gave a man 2 barrels and that elegant double-gun balance for a fraction of what the fine guns cost, and it became the quintessential everyday double of rural America. It hung over countless fireplaces and rode in countless trucks, swinging on quail busting out of the fence rows and on doves crossing the stubble at dusk. There was a dignity to a double gun that no pump could touch, a sense of an older, statelier way of shooting. The Fox Model B let an ordinary family share in that without going broke. Savage built it for decades, then ended it as cheap imports and pump guns took the affordable end of the market, and the working man's double quietly slipped away. Number 7. The Stevens Model 311. If the Fox was the affordable double, the Stevens Model 311 was the ubiquitous one, the side-by-side that turned up on more American farms than perhaps any other. Savage built them by the boxcar load, a plain, blunt, honest, hammerless double with 2 triggers and an unbreakable disposition. It cost little, it lasted forever, and it never pretended to be anything fancier than what it was. A tool for clearing the air of crows and the fence rows of rabbits. Farm wives kept one by the back step against foxes in the chicken run, and farm husbands carried the same gun afield for the fall hunt. The 311's homely strength made it the default double of the countryside for half a century. It only disappeared when the side-by-side itself fell from favor, replaced by the over and under and the pump, taking the plain old 311 down with the whole vanishing breed. Number 6. The L.C. Smith. Folks called it the Elsie, a play on the initials, and the L.C. Smith was the double gun that a farmer dreamed about. Built by the Hunter Arms Company in Syracuse, New York, it wore a true sidelock, the mark of a finer class of shotgun, with graceful lines and a heft that spoke of real craftsmanship. Most farms could not afford one new, but a well-off farmer, a banker who liked to hunt, or a family that had saved for years might own an Elsie and treat it like an heirloom from the day it arrived. It came down off the wall for the opening of quail season and went back up gleaming with oil. Stories of the Elsie carry a note of reverence the cheaper guns never earned. When the company folded and the great American doubles lost their market, the L.C. Smith became a cherished memory, the gun that represented the best the farm could hope to own. Number 5. The Parker Brothers Double. Of all the American doubles, none carried more prestige than the Parker, built in Meriden, Connecticut, and known across the land as Old Reliable. A Parker was the finest shotgun most Americans had ever heard of, the gun a farmer pointed to in a magazine and said someday, the one a man might own a single example of and never let his sons forget it. Its barrels locked up like a bank door, its wood glowed, and its balance made it feel alive in the hands. Few hung behind a barn door. These were guns kept in the parlor, wiped down on Sundays, but the ones that did serve on prosperous farms were treated as treasures. Remington bought the Parker name in the 1930s, and production wound down soon after. The fall of Parker marked the end of an era when America built doubles to rival any in the world, and Old Reliable passed into legend. Number 4. The Winchester Model 21. When Winchester set out to build a double gun that would simply never wear out, it built the Model 21, and it may have succeeded. Introduced in the early 1930s, the Model 21 was so overbuilt, so massively strong, that the factory test-fired guns with proof loads that would have wrecked lesser doubles, and the Model 21 shrugged them off. A farmer who owned one owned it for life and passed it down with the land. It cost dearly, and most working families could only admire it. But on the larger, more prosperous farms, the Model 21 became the gun of a lifetime, the one a man bought once and never replaced. It swung on pheasants over the picked corn and stood ready for anything. Winchester eventually made it by special order only, pricing it out of the ordinary man's reach, and the toughest American double became a rarity even in its own homeland. Number 3. The Winchester Model 1897. Now we reach the gun that did everything. John Browning designed the Model 1897 with an exposed hammer and a slide action, and it became one of the most versatile shotguns ever to hang behind a barn door. You could see the hammer, thumb it, trust it, and the pump action let a farmer fire as fast as he could work the slide. A wall of lead against a marauding pack of crows or a fox caught in the open. It served on farms, in trenches, in prisons, and in the hands of lawmen. And that universal toughness made it the gun families bet their livelihood on. It cleared barns of vermin and brought rabbits home for 50 years without a whimper. Winchester built it well into the modern era before retiring it, and the exposed Hammer 97 became a piece of American iron so beloved that its silhouette alone says farm, frontier, and hard, honest work. Number 2. The Remington Model 11 stands aside, for second place belongs to a double once more, no, to the gun that nearly every list forgets to crown. Second place goes back to the Winchester name, to the gun families fought over in the reading of wills. But the true runner-up here is the autoloader, the Auto 5, made possible, and the doubles could never match for speed. The gun a prosperous farm finally trusted to do a pump's work without a hand on the slide. It was the bridge between the old single-shot world and the modern field. The gun a father carried so his son would have something better than he started with. On the farm, it meant arrival, a sign the family had climbed a rung, and it swung on ducks, dropping into the flooded bottoms with an ease the old hammer guns could only envy. As newer gas-operated designs took over, it too slid into the past, remembered as the gun that taught America what a fast follow-up shot could feel like. Number 1. The Winchester Model 12. And finally, in first place, the gun Winchester proudly called Perfect Repeater. The Model 12 arrived in 1912, a hammerless pump so smooth, so strong, and so beautifully made that men spoke of it the way they spoke of a good horse or a good wife. Winchester built around 2 million of them across half a century, and a great many ended their working lives exactly where this video began, loaded and waiting behind a barn door. The Model 12 cleared the corn crib of rats, the henhouse of hawks, and the fence rows of rabbits, and then it dressed up and went hunting on Sunday like it had been built for nothing else. Its slide action ran like oiled glass, and its steel receiver outlasted the men who carried it. Winchester finally ended production in the 1960s because the Model 12 simply cost too much to build by hand. Nothing made since has quite replaced it. Families still pass them down, oiled and honored, the perfect gun for an America that has otherwise vanished. These 25 guns were never about glory. They were about a fox in the henhouse at midnight, a rabbit for the stew pot, and a tool a man could trust with the safety of his whole farm. They hung on nails by the kitchen door, rode in the beds of trucks, and asked for nothing but a wipe of oil. If your grandfather owned one of these, tell me which in the comments, and tell me if it is still in the family. Because these were not just shotguns. They were the quiet partners of the American farm, and the people who carried them never forgot.